Welcome to Must See IMDB, a podcast where we break down IMDb's #1 top-rated episode of a classic TV show, and then we discuss, did the voters do the show justice, or are there some hidden gem episodes that need a boost up the list? I'm Abby.
And I'm Katie.
Now, you may have noticed our voices are exactly the same, and we talk very quickly because we're twins.
And because we're discussing the Gilmore Girls. As kids, we watched this show a lot. And in the past 2 weeks, have continued to do so right through to today. We watch, we discuss, and now we're discussing with you.
So let's get straight into it in Lorelai Gilmore fashion. Now, it's funny you say we watched this as kids because this show premiered in 2000, so
we were kids, we were babies, we were, high school, college.
We were off to college, but maybe not Yale. So I do remember watching this as, an early 20s person and very much loving everything about this show.
Well, why don't we start off with a little synopsis of what is this show?
All right. Well, Stars Hollow is the destination of this show. It's your quintessential idyllic New England small town. There's a gazebo. There's a town square.
They have a festival pretty much every other Tuesday and some sort of, town fundraiser event every other Friday.
And when there isn't an event, there's a town hall meeting where everyone talks over everyone and fights break out regularly.
But on the other Fridays, we have a mother-daughter pair, Lorelai Gilmore, who's in sort of her, early mid-30s, and her teenage daughter, Rory. At the beginning of the show, Rory is 16. So Lorelai, the mom, had Rory when she was 16. Her well-to-do parents essentially cut her off from the family. She went out on her own and has built up a life in the town of Stars Hollow. She runs the local inn. She's kind of a bit of a success story. She pulled herself up out of, a difficult situation. And now she and, frankly, the rest of the town are raising Rory sort of all together.
Yes, it's that it takes a village, or in this case, the eccentric characters that all live in Stars Hollow.
Yes, they're lovable. They can be annoying, but some of the best parts of the series are basically them fighting with each other.
So that's the premise. We've got our main characters, mother, daughter. Also, I just say Emily Gilmore in particular as the grandmother is the third Gilmore girl.
Yes, and Richard is Lorelai's dad. So Emily and Richard come back into their lives because Rory is an intelligent young girl, and Lorelai, her mom, wants the best for her. So she wants her to attend a local private school, but of course she can't afford the ridiculous tuition to said private school. So for the first time in almost 16 years, she reaches out to her parents, and there's an agreement run where the grandparents will pay for Rory to attend this fancy school. However, in return, Rory and Lorelai have to come over every Friday for dinner. So we get to see Lorelai and Rory sort of slowly come back into the totally different world from Stars Hollow. It's fancy, it's elite. There's yachts and parties and crystal all over the place.
Yeah, and that's where much of the family drama comes into play, because on one hand, Lorelai rejected all that privilege and went off to live life on her own terms. And yet here she is knocking on that door to get all those opportunities for her daughter that she, on one hand, didn't have because she was a young mother. On the other hand, didn't have because she entirely rejected her family and walked away from it all. So it is an interesting culture class juxtaposition that drives a lot of the drama.
We'll come back to that. I've got some comments on that little dichotomy.
So should we jump right into what the voters on IMDb say is the best episode of this show?
Go for it.
All right, so let's head into season 4. This is the season finale, episode 22. It's called Raincoats and Recipes. So at this point in the series, Lorelai's dream is to open her own inn. So the Dragonfly Inn is her own inn that she runs with her best friend, Suki, played by Melissa McCarthy.
Oh, who totally knocks it out of the park. Love her. Now, a few fun things to mention. The set for the Dragonfly Inn is actually the same house used on The Waltons back in the day. Lovely little show about a family growing up in Appalachia. And mentioning Melissa McCarthy, she was not the original actress in this role. The original role went to another Amy Sherman Palladino favorite, Alex Borstein. Now, Alex Borstein is also a very talented actress. However, she was a cast regular on Mad TV. So when the pilot got picked up, Alex Borstein, who went on to play in Amy Sherman Palladino's new hit, The Marvelous Ms. Maisel, she had to step down and the role went to Melissa McCarthy. However, even more fun is that the actor who plays Jackson, who eventually is a boyfriend of Suki's and then goes on to marry her in later seasons, that role went to Jackson Douglas, who is the real life husband of Alex Borstein. At the time, they've since divorced. But the original pilot had both of them bickering back and forth like an old married couple because, haha, they were an old married couple.
Oh, I didn't know that marriage connection. That's hilarious.
I know. So interesting that it worked out quite well with him and Melissa McCarthy, who was not his wife.
What I think drives this episode to the top of this list is that pretty much everyone in town is a part of this episode. The premise is that Suki and Lorelai are about to open this inn for real, and so they invite all their friends from town to have a test run before, they welcome strangers into their inn.
So we've got one of those wonderful episodes where we get to see pretty much everybody in the cast at one point or another.
Yes. So some examples are that we've got Kirk, who's a town regular, and now he has a girlfriend, Lulu, coming. This idea of them sharing a room at the inn terrifies him because apparently he has night terrors. So he goes running to Luke of Luke's Diner, who's the main catch in this show. He's the sort of built-in back and forth, on and off romantic tension.
They're the Ross and Rachel of this show, the will they or won't they throughout every season.
And in this episode, Kirk goes running to Luke to help him with Lulu should he have a night terror. Now, also ratcheting up the romantic tension here is Rory's high school boyfriend is working at the inn on the construction crew. His name is Dean. He's been there for seasons on and off, but clearly Rory is looking at him with fresh eyes and doing the whole longing gaze, even though he is now married and off the market.
Yeah, I was enjoying this episode until I saw the first scene between them and I was like, oh no, is this one of those episodes where we're exploring that again? And then I started to get a little nervous.
The other character who's nervous is Lorelai. She's usually calm, cool, has a witty comeback for everything, but she's starting to pick up that Luke is communicating pretty clearly that he's interested in her. Lorelai does not know how to respond to this. She's falling all over herself at Luke's diner. She runs face first into a door when he hands her the flowers at the inn. She's very discombobulated by all of this adult communication skills going on from Luke.
Yes, gosh forbid people actually talk to each other in an adult manner and express their feelings with words on this show. I'm telling you, half the problems on this show could be solved if people had a 5-minute conversation.
Speaking of miscommunication, at one of those awkward Friday night dinners, it's an ice bath between Richard and Emily, who everyone at the table knows is separated, but it's one of those, they haven't told Lorelai they're separated, so she's pushing them and making things difficult, so they'll have to admit they are separated. So she invites them to this opening, not from the goodness of her heart to include her parents, but rather because she wants them to dismiss her idea and admit that they're separated. But will they do this? No, because the Gilmores, unlike Luke, don't know how to communicate clearly, and they icily accept her invitation.
Yes, forcing themselves into a very, very uncomfortable weekend ahead. So one of the things I love about this show is how over the top the production design is. And we get way more of that production with this episode because it's the big opening. So we get to see the horses that Lorelai has bought for in guests to go on rides. There's little train of golf carts that pull up with everybody on these little trams that go from some unseen parking lot right up to the front door of the Dragonfly Inn. It's just luscious, overdone element after overdone element.
It reminded me of like the chocolate room in the Willy Wonka movie where you're just like, like everything is just so poised and perfect and there's something gorgeous in every corner of the frame.
And another thing that the show does well is chaos, but like organized chaos. In this show, when all the guests arrive, the last detail that has not yet been solved is that Lorelai's contractor has not yet gotten all of the room doors installed. So literally, as the guests come and check in, each guest is accompanied by a lovely young construction worker who literally hauls their door up with them to install it as soon as they get to their room.
So we've got townspeople classics like Miss Patty arriving, followed by Taylor, who of course has brought his own comment cards because he is prepared to find fault with everything that Lorelai has been doing. And then of course Babette arrives, Lorelai and Rory's neighbor, and who is just spectacularly delightful in every scene she's in.
Her voice. I love her voice.
All right. Well, of course, Emily and Richard arrive still in, Snow Queen mode and are shocked that they're not staying in the inn. She gave them the extra special cottage so they have true privacy to continue to be miserable together. And then one of these quote unquote other guys throughout the series that dates Lorelai arrives. This guy is Jason. He's a posh business associate of Lorelai's father, Richard. They went into business together. Their relationship soured. Jason decided to sue her father, and Lorelai was like, okay, I have issues with my parents, but I can't date someone who is suing my family. So they broke up. But he arrives all in a tither because he has decided they should get back together. He has all his reasons prepared. He cares not that she's in the middle of this dry run for her dream come true inn, and plants himself down to wait until she has a moment to spare so that he can make his proposals and arguments for why they should get back together.
I never bought this relationship, not only to mention that he's so disrespectful of her. She clearly states you need to leave, and he just refuses.
In this latest rewatching, I took Jason's behavior to essentially be the male version of Lorelai.
Really?
Oh my gosh, yes. Because as I watched more and more Gilmore Girls over the past couple of weeks here, Lorelai acts exactly this way. If she wants something, she shows up, demands it. If the person is like, no, I can't do that, does she respectfully accept their answer and leave? No. Well, I have all my arguments, and I just know that I'm going to win you over with my witty words and my delightful manner, and I will not leave, and I will not take no for an answer. And she would do exactly what Jason is doing.
Wow. I'm already thinking of a scene in which, now that you mention this, I can see what you're saying. There's another boyfriend, Max, we'll discuss later. But yes, there's a scene where she is literally following him around a room where he's like, I need you to stay away from me. And she just won't even give him physical space. So, okay, I'm buying this.
Okay, so then Luke's like, hey, who's this? And of course, Babette spills the gossip beans. But again, this is the top-rated episodes. Luke does not give up his clear communication skills and instead marches up to Lorelai and is basically like, WTF, I'm being very clear in my intentions. Who's this random guy who's shown up, who's saying that you're back together, et cetera, et cetera. And essentially, she agrees with him and they share a kiss.
I thought we were on track, and now you're standing there looking at me like I'm crazy.
I'm not looking at you like you're crazy.
You know the last time I bought flowers for someone? Never. That's when. Very easy stat to remember.
I loved the flowers.
And then when I walked you home after the wedding, there was a moment. I thought there was a moment.
There was a moment. What are you doing?
Will you just stand still? What are you doing?
Will you just stand still?
Okay, and that is why I think this is the #1 rated episode, because it seems to me like the IMDb voters are very sentimental, and we've been waiting for this kiss for what? 4 full seasons. This is the very last one of season 4.
Yes. Now, speaking of kisses and the other romantic arc going on here, Rory goes home to get some CDs for her mom, and who should knock on the door but again the married Dean, who has come to just talk about what happened earlier, and also, did I mention that my marriage is a mess and we're not happy? And Rory's like, oh well, then I guess that means it's totally okay for us to have sex now.
This storyline is horrible. I cannot stand it. I thought it was just, okay, Rory, yeah, I get it. She's kind of like her mom in that she bats her eyelashes and gets whatever she wants. But Dean would never do this. This is on the par of like Sex and the City, where they make, what's his name, do stupid things. I expect Carrie to do dumb stuff. I do not expect Aiden to do horrible things. I like Aiden. I like Dean. I don't like this.
Well, fair enough. I'm pretty sure most of the fandom, at least retrospectively, thinks this is a terrible idea. But I do want to give the show credit for, Lorelai comes home, sees Dean, figures out what happens, and essentially argue all the reasons this was terrible to Rory's face. So at least we have that counterbalance going on within the show itself. But of course, this, destroys Rory and she runs out of the house to call Dean. But of course, Dean's wife answers the phone. So she can't even talk to her beloved and her life is ruined.
Okay, here's one of the main problems I've had with this series since my very first watching. I love Stars Hollow. I love Lorelai. I love all of the minor characters. I even love Emily and Richard. I think they're hilarious. I don't like the Rory character because I've said this before to many of my friends, I'll say it again. When you create something like a story or a show, you have to show things, you can't just tell things. And for all 7 seasons of this show, we are told by every character in the series that Rory is a good person. Rory is a kind person. Rory cares about other people, but every action that she takes completely is not in keeping with that notion. She cheats on people. She treats boyfriends horribly. She seems to have standards for others that she doesn't have for herself. She steals things. She crashes things. She lies. And yet everybody keeps saying what a great person she is. And I'm like, please show me some actions to support this because I'm tired of everybody telling me this and none of it supports that idea.
And thus concludes Katie's Rory rant.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's just my main thing. This is my big thing about this show, has been from day one, and I'm still scratching my head over it.
I agree with you. I think the character has a lot of problems. I also think that the character changes wildly throughout the course of the show. And I'm really curious as to what the beginning idea was for Rory, because I think what we see, particularly in season 1, quickly spirals out of control with her entering this privileged life. So I almost wonder if this was kind of the point, because it's not like Amy Sherman Palladino was like, yes, and now we're going to make her solved and a great character for the reboot. No, she doubled down on Rory's horribleness for the reboot. So I almost feel like, is that the point? Because as Rory gets more and more sucked into the life of privilege that her grandparents are a part of and providing for her, she gets more and more terrible. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, and it does consistently get worse throughout the series.
Just real quick, one thing I'll point out is that after her mom confronts her on what a terrible decision this was, this, of course, is the season finale. And then in between this episode and the beginning of the next one, we're led to understand that Rory left for the entire summer to go to Europe with her grandmother, thus sticking it to Lorelai for showing her, you've made a huge mistake here. And rather than like staying, dealing with the consequences, no, she's whisked off to the life of luxury via her grandmother and, not spending the entire summer with Lorelai at all.
Yeah, another fine example of us all being told what a great person Rory is, but she makes horrible decisions.
Right. So I'm guessing this is not your favorite episode, and I'm going to further gamble that perhaps a non-Rory centric episode will be your favorite.
Okay, well, at least you're correct in that. As I was rewatching, I was way more focused on the supporting characters than I was on Lorelai or Rory or even Emily and Richard, because it's the supporting characters that are so well cast, do such a great job. They're really what bring the joy to this show. Not only joy, but comedy, all of that good popcorny stuff that makes me feel warm and cozy about this show has nothing to do with the main characters. I remember the episode that I chose, which is shockingly a Rory-centric one. It's called They Shoot Gilmores, Don't They? It is from season 3, episode 7. And yes, Crazy things happen to Rory during this, but more importantly, this is the episode where we have the 24-hour dance marathon in Stars Hollow. It's a yearly event. Kirk, the town Renaissance man, constantly wins, and Lorelai is determined to beat him this year. She goes through several possible dancing partners, but finally, when she's abandoned at the last minute, she commandeers Rory to dance with her. Not only this a 24-hour dance marathon, it's World War II themed. So the entire town shows up to this bedazzled gymnasium. They're all decked out in their 1940s gear, even with the fabulous hairstyles. They have a great swing dancing band. They've clearly hired swing dancers for the background actors. We have some serious dancing going on, and then hilarity ensues as more and more people get exhausted throughout the course of this episode. I love it. We have a Sookie Jackson choral that goes on in between the dancing. We have Kirk totally showing off with his very talented dancing partner. Luke is there to serve coffee to the dancers and sort of grumble about how crazy this whole thing is. And so I have to say, once again, production value, fun little background stories. It's a lot of fun watching this totally ridiculous Stars Hollow event take place.
So I rewatched this one because I remember loving this one in my initial watch. And I couldn't stand Lorelai's behavior and I couldn't stand Rory's behavior during this entire episode. It was like nails on a chalkboard and I could not select it as a favorite any longer.
Let me talk a little bit about that because yes, I maybe wasn't so annoyed by Lorelai, but I was very much annoyed by Rory. This is the episode where 4 seasons now, she has been flirting outrageously with Luke's nephew, Jess, who's your typical television show, quote unquote, bad boy. He wears the leather jacket. Oh, but did we forget to tell you that he's an intelligent bad boy? No, he can't bother to actually attend school, but he reads books, just like Rory. So they're meant to be. Meanwhile, her boyfriend, Dean, yes, the same Dean who she later sleeps with after he gets married to somebody else, he finally calls her to task, chews her out in front of the entire town, and storms off. And I'm just sitting there like, yes, oh, thank you, Dean, applause, because you are doing what I want to do so badly. He literally says, I am done. And I literally just wanted to stand up, yell encouragement to Dean for getting the hell out of there and saying what everybody needs to be telling her.
Here. Couldn't agree more. That summed up my feelings towards that entire thing.
Well, one more thing about Lorelai. When she first came onto the screen in her costume, I'm like, are you kidding me? Who shows up for a dance marathon in heels? And then I started looking around at all of the other actors in the dance scenes. Nobody is wearing heels.
Well, as a participant in a 30-hour dance marathon in college, I will tell you what
30 hours? Oh my gosh.
Yes, there were 10 3-hour shifts. Now, much like Taylor purports in this episode, you do have a 10-minute break every 3 hours. You bring a suitcase to these events. You have not just 5 pairs of shoes, you also have like 10 different outfits because after 3 hours of dancing straight, trust me, you're going to need a fresh coat of deodorant, perhaps some baby wipes under your armpits and your entire body as much as you can under your clothes, and then like girlfriends cover you as you change your shirt quickly, all within a 10-minute period. Strap on your new pair of shoes that aren't sweaty and gross and get back out on that floor. So the fact that Lorelai is so woefully unprepared for this is I don't understand.
Oh. Speaking of the 10-minute breaks, another one of my favorite parts of the show. Lane, who is Rory's best friend and one of the like 2 people of color on this show. She's Korean. Her mother is extremely religious. She's constantly under the thumb of her very strict mother. So of course she's not allowed to dance in this dance marathon. Heavens that a boy would touch her hand. No. She's serving fake egg salad sandwiches. But one of my favorite storylines of the show, my favorite romantic storylines of the show is Lane's romantic storyline with Dave. Lane rebels against her mother and secretly has joined a rock band, which Dave is the lead guitarist in. He's played by Adam Brody. He is charm personified. He's willing to play Lane's mom's game. There's this great scene where he's introducing himself to Lane's mom. He lays on the charm. He talks about his Christian parents. And then in code, lets Lane know that if she can get away for 5 minutes, they can meet on the church steps. And he can say all of this right in front of Lane's mom. Lane gets it. The mom is completely oblivious. Adam Brody rocks. Love this storyline for them. And yet another reason why I love this episode.
Way better than Jess. Why anyone would make eyes at Jess is beyond me.
In this episode, he's just mean. I just don't understand why we should be liking him, because he's just rude and not nice and he treats people like crap.
Yeah, but Rory is all for it.
Even with the reboot, people were like, Team Jess. And I'm like, Team why?
Well, I don't know if you watched the entire reboot. He was the best potential because the pickings were slim.
It seems to me like he was the one of her former boyfriends who actually had gotten his act together.
Well, that's the thing. In the reboot, he's become an adult, whereas for sure Rory hasn't.
Mm-hmm. So long story, sort of short. That is my favorite episode. Clearly, Ab, I'm going to guess this was not your favorite episode too.
Well, I went through so many episodes. I at least needed an episode where I like Lorelai and Rory, or I'm at least okay with how they're behaving. I was like, I'm not going to find one where I like the main story, but also there's a bunch of townspeople stuff going on. And then Cinnamon's Wake. This is from season 1. It's episode 5. I watched it today, and it was actually the warm cup of tea, or in Lorelai and Rory's case, a cup of coffee that was soothing, creamy, a little bit sweet, relaxing, delicious, and there were no problems in it, and I loved it.
I don't remember this one. Give me the lowdown.
So essentially it starts out where they're at one of their Friday night dinners. It's just the Gilmore Girls, Emily, Lorelai, and Rory. And one of their cousins has died. And so, of course, Emily expects Lorelai to attend the funeral this upcoming week. Lorelai is like, I'm not going. I don't know who this person is. Fast forward to, they're headed off to Chilton. Rory is really concerned that Lorelai is supposed to bake something for the Chilton bake sale. And as we all know, Lorelai does not bake, does not cook. She can't show up with an armful of Pop-Tarts. So Lorelai surprises Rory by showing up to this very posh bake sale with Suki in hand and a table full of gorgeous cakes.
Oh, love it, love it.
Who should walk by but Max Medina? I think this is one of his early sightings. And okay, here's the first thing I love about what Max is talking about. Lorelai is a little frosty towards him, and it's because he refused, along with the dean of the school in a previous episode, to let Rory take a test because she showed up late. Now, granted, she like hit a deer on her way to school or something because she overslept and missed the bus and blah, blah, blah. But I love that Max Medina is like, I still stand by my decision not to let her take the test. Much like you were cheering for Dean, I was like, yes, sometimes life has consequences, people. Suck it up and move on. How can you fix it for next time?
Yeah, I have to say that in my first watching of it, when it was actually airing live, I wasn't a huge Max fan because I was just focused on Luke. I was Team Luke all the way. I could care less who else she was with. But in subsequent watchings, I think he's my favorite. He pushed back when he needed to. Luke, unlike the episode we discussed previously, is horrible at communicating. Basically, his and Lorelai's biggest problem is that they can never actually talk honestly to each other. And Max can. And he's willing to be very open and communicative, not to mention he's very romantic. I'm like, go Max.
Yeah. And of course, this is season 1. So like Max is going to hit the road eventually. And they've always played it as Lorelai was never really in love with him. But I am telling you, there was chemistry there. And it's not like it's all coming from Max. She's definitely taken in by him, which we know she is because she has her concerns because, of course, this is Rory's teacher. How awkward is that? The last thing she wants to do is make things terrible for Rory. But everything she does makes it clear that screw Rory, she's going to go for this. So they have a very cute coffee date, delightful, witty banter. It's comedic, it's cute, etc. Then, unfortunately, Babette and Maury's beloved cat, Cinnamon, who we've seen them wheeling around town in this adorable wagon, Cinnamon dies. And Babette is, distraught. There's a veterinarian there. The cat has a little blanket over it. But then Babette describes how she discovered the cat was dead. And it's this hilarious story of her poking the cat too hard and the cat falling off something. And then she had just waxed the floors. So the cat goes shooting across the floor like a hockey puck, et cetera, et cetera. So it goes from very sad to, you're trying not to laugh. This calls for an enormous town wake for this cat.
Of course it does. That's exactly what it calls for, because this is Stars Hollow.
Yes. And so as usual, the other thing I love about this episode is you have little moments for each of our most beloved townspeople. So for example, Kirk is now helping manage Taylor's grocery store, and Miss Patty loves to sample the produce before she buys it. So she's, eating grapes and taking bites of things.
Excuse me, ma'am, what are you doing?
Please, honey, don't call me ma'am. Makes me feel older than 25. Here, have a pea pod.
I'm assuming that you're going to pay for the food that you've consumed on the premises?
Oh, so brusque. And you are?
I'm the new assistant manager here.
Oh, well, listen here, my fine friend, who, if you had a better hairstyle, I might consider dating. I do this all the time.
Not from now on, I'm sorry.
Oh, now wait a minute here. I've been sampling food at this establishment for years.
The next time you put something in that mouth that doesn't belong there, I'm going to remove it and then call the police.
But then later at the wake, he finds her, apologizes for his behavior because he didn't understand that she was Miss Patty, and he pays his due respects to her. So I love that they have a couple of scenes together. Also, an interesting pairing that you don't often see in this one, and that's Luke and Suki. So when Suki and Lorelai are having lunch at Luke's, he gets distracted. And of course, Suki is a chef. So she sees what needs to be done behind the counter, is adding garnish to everyone's plate.
Oh my gosh, she takes over Luke's. This is great.
And she does a fine job of it, much to his deep resentment. So then later at the wake, they both have brought food, his diner style food. And then she has all these trays of canapes, etc. And you just sort of see them vying for control and who's going to kind of lead the food here. So I love seeing that uncommon but delightful pairing.
Oh, that is good. I love this.
And then, of course, you just have Babette, and she just knows how to light up a scene.
She consistently in the show has these bizarre stories that she tells, and you're totally charmed every time you get one of these. They're gold.
Yes. Babette mentions that this cat was 260 years old in cat years. So I divided that by 7 and got somewhere between 37 and 38 years old. So
oh my
gosh, very old.
Miracle cat.
And so there's comedic moments where Babette is emptying an enormous medicine cabinet for this cat and describing what each medicine is for. But also her bereavement over the cat is put through the conversation as well. And I just love her sort of emotional mood swings that are both comedic and have some real heart to them as well. Okay, and then here's the final reason why I love this episode. Rory's romance is just starting with Dean, and it's before they things up with Rory's love life. Because here's the deal with Dean in season 1. Early in this episode, he thanks Rory for getting him the job at the grocery store because now he's solvent. So he basically uses SAT words in his regular conversation. He's smart. Then he jumps on a bus to surprise her, flirts with her outrageously, and is wearing a black leather jacket the entire time. Now, not in this episode, but in another season 1 episode, it's rumored that he has a motorcycle. So basically what they were going for here was a nice version of Jess, and that was going to be Dean. But then by season 2, Dean never wears leather. Dean has no motorcycle. Dean is dumb and boring. That's the way they suddenly pulled the rug out from under the Dean character and gave all the more risky behaviors all to Jess. So it was just complete yin and yang for Rory to choose between.
Oh, absolutely. I watched an episode where Dean's arguing with Rory about the merits of Hunter S. Thompson. So he's forcing her to read his favorite Hunter S. Thompson books, and she's forcing him to read Jane Austen, and they are, gasp, discussing it. The guy is not dumb. except when Jess comes into town and then all of a sudden he has to be the boring, nice guy.
Yes, that was one of the reasons why I could not select that Bracebridge dinner, because Jess is basically like, what do you even talk to him about? I'm in school with him and he seems like kind of a dope. Like that was the line. And after seeing these early season 1 episodes of Dean, the writing made me angry. So I love this early episode. I also love Rory in this episode. She's her usual awkward self. Why didn't they keep it that way? Why didn't she continue to have kind of awkward boys? And so this is still in the early days. Everyone still seems kind of innocent and at least decent and kind to one another. And I loved it. Season 1, episode 5, Cinnamon's Wake.
Yeah, that season 1 is a pretty darn good one.
Yes, one last thing I wanted to point out about Cinnamon's Wake is, of course, it's a literary allusion to Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce. So I just want to read to you what Wikipedia says about Finnegan's Wake. Joyce said, quote, every syllable can be justified, end quote. Due to its linguistic experiments, stream of consciousness writing style, literary allusions, free dream associations, and abandonment of narrative conventions, Finnegan's Wake remains largely unread by the general public. Now, what I do think Amy Sherman Palladino did is she took all those things, the stream of consciousness dialogue, the literary and pop culture allusions, all those things are the Gilmore Girls, but Amy Sherman Palladino managed to make it a huge popular success. So kudos to her for that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember reading a normal script for a 1-hour show would be 50 pages and theirs would be like 80. They even had to hire a vocal coach solely to train the actors on how to speak more quickly. And Scott Patterson said that both he and Lauren Graham quit smoking because they didn't have the lung capacity to keep up with the amount of dialogue they had to push out before they could take a breath.
Yes. All right. So let's play a little game. And when you have fun facts, just sprinkle them in. Katie, in real life, you love hypothetical questions. So I'm doing hypothetical questions, Gilmore Girls style.
I love playing hypothetical questions.
So first question is, what town event would you elbow Taylor to the side and announce at the town meeting?
Okay, I know what I would do. This is inspired by something that we do in my hometown. Every year there's a regatta on the river, and there's this fantastic competition that I actually want to enter in real life. And it's called the Anything That Floats race. Anyone can sign up. If you can create a craft that floats, you put them all in the water at the same time. Everybody races, I don't know, a quarter of a mile or something. And whoever can actually cross the finish line wins. And usually that's only about one craft. And these crafts are hilarious. They're made out of junk from people's recycling bins. They're made out of like large rubber duckies that people have fashioned together. It is the best race ever. It's called Whatever Floats Race.
Ooh, I love this idea. So who do you think of the Stars Hollow folks would win this race?
Oh, Kirk. The man has a different job in pretty much every episode. I think over the course of the series, he had 62 jobs. The actor, by the way, stated that his favorite job throughout the whole series was when he got to be the announcer for the hockey game. But yeah, I think he would come up with the most ridiculous thing, but then like miraculously it would float and totally, blow all the other boats out of the water.
All right. So the winner of the dance marathon is also going to win the regatta.
Oh, absolutely. No question about it.
Okay. I think one of those neighborhood progressive dinners. I think the Stars Hollow folks would make it a hoot.
Ooh.
Wherein you start at one person's house and you have drinks and a few appetizers. We're talking about the Gilmore, so we could even do courses here. And you go to a different home for each of them and are served by a different family, ending, of course, with dessert, etc.
I would just want to keep circling back to Suki's house.
Well, my idea would be you'd start at Suki's and she'd have all these fabulous delights, maybe some veggies from Jackson, but she'd also then have to go to the next one and be nitpicking what the other people were not doing well.
They'd probably just serve Lucky Charms marshmallows at the Gilmore house.
My thought was if they were going to participate, something would go wrong, like they don't even have gas going to their oven because let's be honest, they never cook. And so they would have to do an emergency thing where they get everyone on buses out to Emily and Richard's. And then we have all these Stars Hollow people trying to enjoy an over-the-top desserts presented by Emily and her crew of 27 servants.
Oh, I want to see that scene. I want to see that scene. We've talked about it before, how Stars Hollow is the reason why we love going back and watching this. You know, what I found really interesting is that when the creator, Amy Sherman Palladino, was talking about, you know, why she created this show, it had nothing to do with relationships and romantic hurdles every 5 seconds. The reason why she was inspired to do this show was the concept of Stars Hollow. She was in Connecticut in this little town called Washington Depot. While she was there, they just happened to be having their fall festival. And it was like a Stars Hollow fall festival where there was this race and that hay bale maze, and each of the businesses had some sort of crazy deal going on. And she went to the local diner, and people would just get up and go behind the counter and pour themselves a cup. Like, everybody knew each other. It was clearly a bunch of eccentric, interesting people living together. And that was her inspiration for this show. Now, they have used the Stars Hollow sets in a bunch of different movies and TV shows. So if you're a Broadway fan, the 1962 movie version of Music Man used the Stars Hollow backlot. If you move on into the 70s, the Dukes of Hazzard had several scenes filmed on the same lot. And then once Gilmore Girls was over, they extensively used the set for Pretty Little Liars, and they also use it to represent Riverdale on the show Riverdale.
All right, next hypothetical question. Rory and Lorelai famously eat nothing but junk all the time. What meal, anything you've seen on the show, one of those pies from a festival, maybe that Bracebridge dinner, do you want to try plum pudding? What meal or character from the show would you like to serve you a meal? And what would be on the menu?
Here's my thing. It would definitely be Suki. You just start salivating whenever they have a kitchen shot. I would want to be at that big work table that she has. It's typically shown in the Independence Inn. It always has crazy delicious stuff on it. Suki is usually sampling or garnishing or putting final touches on while she and Lorelai have these long, best friend conversations. And that's what I want. She was doing a wedding at one point, and her cake looked amazing, and all of the dishes that she was preparing looked amazing. I just want to be in that kitchen with Suki, eating all of that amazing stuff that we always see in the kitchen shots.
Delicious. All right. Since we can't all eat like Rory and Lorelai, there's this one episode where Lorelai invites Dean over to watch a movie with them. And of course, Rory is horrified that her mother invited this boy over and they haven't even gone on a date yet. But the spread is incredible. There's like tracking shots of all the junk food they have prepared for this as they nervously both await the arrival of Dean. And I think I would just want to dive into all that junk, even the red vines, and wake up the next day not nauseated from the sugar high. All right, next question. If you lived in Stars Hollow, which of the businesses would you like to run, or what new business would you open in town?
Okay, you go first on this one. I got to think about this one.
Well, I was watching several of the earlier episodes, and there is a bakery in town. It's called Weston's Bakery. It's run by Fran. Eventually, she's worked into the plot because she dies, and she was the owner of the Dragonfly Inn, but she never wanted to sell. And so her death sets up that Lorelai and Suki are able to purchase the inn from her estate now that she's passed on.
Oh my gosh, there's this ridiculous scene where the pallbearers are carrying Fran through the town square, and Lorelai and Suki choose that moment to go and negotiate the sale of the Dragonfly Inn with one of the pallbearers, who is Fran's nephew. And the nephew is played by Ben Falcone, who is Melissa McCarthy's husband in real life.
Delightful. Oh, he did look familiar. I was wondering why he looked familiar.
Oh yeah, it's a ridiculous scene, and he pulls it off because he's a comic genius.
Well, there's also several episodes that do have brief appearances by Fran Weston, who runs the bakery. She's played by Linda Porter. I recognized her because she plays Myrtle on Superstore. She did end up passing away in real life during the run of that show, but after she had left Superstore. So lots of love for Linda Porter. She has been on a million things, and I loved her on both shows. So I'm going to reopen Fran's Weston's Bakery in town. What are you doing?
I'm pretty sure there's a bookshop in Stars Hollow. One of the things I love about this show is they name drop the titles of 339 books. I don't think I've ever known of any other television series that would do that. I love that Rory's a reader. Whenever she's holding a book, I'm constantly like freeze screening, trying to figure out what book she's reading. One of my favorite t-shirts, that wonderful shirt that says reading is sexy. And you mentioned that you got it because Rory is wearing it in an episode. And yeah, I would totally love to have like a little coffee/bookshop in the middle of Stars Hollow.
There's definitely an episode where she and Lane are sitting on the floor of the town's bookshop because she's trying to do research on how to properly do sexting with Logan.
Oh, Lord. Okay. Well, I guess that would be occurring in my bookshop.
All right. Now, we've been pretty down on the romantic potential partners on this show. But as two heterosexual women, I feel it is our patriarchal duty to select which beau throughout the series would we actually be okay ending up with.
Gosh, are we younger? Are we older? Does it matter?
I guess you can put yourself in the shoes of a character or you can speak for yourself.
All right, well, then I'm claiming Adam Brody. Dave Rogowski. I literally, after I went through all of my Stars Hollow favorites, I just started following Lane's episodes. I love the early ones where she's going through these crazy antics to get around her mom's really strict rules. And I love this matching with her and Dave. He is full of banter and charm. They totally bond over their shared love of music. He's willing to go through the hoops that the mom sets up for them.
Excuse me, Mrs. Kim, I need to speak with you.
I'm busy, David.
A few weeks ago, you told me that Lane had a crush on me. Well, I have a crush on her, too. Now, I know you have very strict rules about dating and boys, but I just want you to know that I'm a good person. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I've never gotten a ticket. I'm healthy. I take care of myself. I floss. I never watch more than 30 minutes of television a night, partly because I think it's a waste of time, and partly because there's nothing on. I respect my parents. I do well in school. I never play video games in case they do someday prove that playing them can turn you into a serial killer. I don't drink coffee. I hate soda because the carbonation freaks me out. I'm happy to give up meat if you feel strongly about it. I don't mind wearing a tie. I enjoyed playing those hymns on my guitar, and I really, really want to take your daughter to the prom.
And he's not upset by it. To him, it's sort of just a fun extra part of his experience with Lane. And it totally sucks that Adam Brody went to star in his own show in the OC. You know, I have to say, though, that one of the fun things about the Gilmore Girls is that whenever an actor leaves the show for somewhere else, they basically name drop or hint at where that person went. So when Dave Rogowski leaves, they all talk about him moving to California, which he did to go on the OC.
Oh, that is fun. I like that. Well, in this rewatch, I was most charmed by Max Medina. Again, the banter, the witty repartee, the romantic gestures, etc. But at the end of the day, I'm going to go with Luke because we've talked about other characters in the shows we watch that resemble my husband. And he's a little bit grumpy and he's very set in his ways, but he also is there for you when you truly need someone. So at the end of the day, I'm going to say I would marry Luke, but boy, was Max Medina charming on this rewatch.
Oh my gosh, now that you're pointing this out, I'm totally seeing, yes, you did marry Luke. So speaking of fun love interest, a few fun things about Scott Patterson. He was a pitcher in the Atlanta Braves minor league system. So when he's always wearing that baseball cap, now you know why. It's also fun because, you know, he is kind of a grump as a character. When Scott Patterson showed up for his audition, it was the second of 3 auditions for that day. He was late to his third audition when he was at this one for Gilmore Girls, and he was already pretty convinced he wasn't going to get it. So he was very whatever about it. And I kind of think that it's that attitude that won him the role, because Amy Sherman Palladino, he happened to be the first one that she saw live. And as soon as he left, she was basically like, yep, that's him. Close it down. I don't need to see anything else.
I love that. He was grumpy, so he got the part of the grumpy guy.
In other love interest news, it seems that Rory couldn't keep things shut down just on set. So she dated Jared Padalecki, who plays Dean, for a while. But then for a long time, for 3.5 years, she dated Milo Ventimiglia, who played Jess.
I'm very curious how that made the off-screen time on set. Possibly a little awkward for Gilmore Girls, but there it is.
Now, previously, we mentioned that Luke and Lorelai kind of have a Ross and Rachel sort of relationship. And another connection between Gilmore Girls and Friends is that there's an episode where we see the totally ostentatious dollhouse that Lorelai Gilmore grew up with. And somehow it ends up being sent to her Stars Hollow house, where it basically spends the rest of the series kind of tucked under their staircase in their living room. Well, that same dollhouse prop is Monica's dollhouse that gets left to her by like some dead grandmother. And it's that episode where Phoebe makes her own version of a dollhouse so that they've got competing dollhouses, but it's the same dollhouse that was Monica's on Friends. So one person that shockingly we have not discussed at all, which I think is a real shame, is Liza Wheel, who plays Paris, who is sort of like a frenemy of Rory's. We first meet her in high school at Chilton. They later both go to Yale together. The actress, Liza Wheel, does such a good job with this role. She did originally audition for the Rory role. It wasn't a fit, but after seeing her, Amy Sherman-Palladino called her and was like, listen, I got to write something for you because I need you in this show. I love Alexis Bledel. She seems like a very nice person. I'm not quite convinced that she's was experienced enough of an actress to take on a role of this caliber. I was also shocked to learn that there were zero chemistry tests between her and Lauren Graham. They literally met on the first day of shooting.
It's just one of those shows that after you watch as many episodes as I have in the last 14 days, it came off in this rewatch to me as much more cardboard and much more them just like, no, I'm going to say this, and then you're going to say that, and then I'm going to say this, and then you're going to say that. And I think I mentioned to you that I was watching like a season 7.
Oh my gosh, Abby, I couldn't remember what episode it was, but then I saw it. I think it's the episode where they all go to Martha's Vineyard.
Exactly.
And they're in the kitchen.
Yep.
And they're making some sort of something or other. And I was like, whoa, what just happened? And I was like, oh my gosh, this is that scene that Abby was talking about.
Yeah, it's just essentially where Alexis Bledel clearly thinks she's supposed to start a line, but Lauren Graham is still finishing. So you see her just freeze until Lauren Graham is done and then immediately start talking as if
it's such a speed race that the emotion is completely cut out of it. And I think that actually helped Alexis Bledel because she's not good with emotion, but she can handle speed. And it is fun to, puzzle maker trying to figure out all of the references, but you're right. It does make for a certain cadence that's kind of unrealistic, and especially in kind of some of the more serious moments when you get into these long whatevers, it's like, wait a minute, like slow it down. Why are we doing this now? Because it doesn't carry the same emotional weight.
To me, the one time where the quick speed and the ridiculousness of the dialogue worked is there's that famous fight at the Friday night dinner. This is like halfway through season 6.
Oh, it's so good. And they keep just cutting the camera to various points throughout this dinner.
Yes. So sometimes you're in an argument and then it quick cuts to now everyone's laughing and sharing a sip of port. Then they're back to being angry at each other. It had me thinking that the comedy from this show is supposed to come from all that quote unquote witty repartee. To me, it felt stilted and cardboardy. And when we talk about funny shows that we are still laughing out loud at, I'll use the examples of Frasier and The Golden Girls. Those shows made the humor about the characters. Like you trained us to think certain things about these characters, and then you made jokes about the stories that you had already told us. And that's what made that fight so hilarious, because we had already had 6 seasons of awkward, sometimes angry, sometimes ridiculous dinners piled one on top of another, and then to kind of make fun of all those tropes, like that's the show referencing its own ridiculousness, and that's the humor. And that was the one thing I can recall actually laughing out loud at.
So this show first started airing 22 years ago. That would be like the difference between 1950 and 1972.
I've rewatched this show since its run. I'm sure we rewatched the entire thing before the reboot in 2016, and I remember enjoying it even more then. So that was only 5 years ago. One thing that I would find really interesting, because this show is so much about privilege and class and the haves and they're called have-nots, but let's be honest,
it's so frustrating when they claim to be have-nots and they're the haves. So for example, Lorelai gets mad at Rory for going to her grandparents to pay for Yale, which frees up money for Lorelai to buy the Dragonfly Inn. Mm-hmm. And she's like, we know how to scrimp and save, but it would still take me forever to, do this Dragonfly Inn. Meanwhile, they are literally packing for their summer-long trip, backpacking across Europe. So somehow these scrimpers and savers can afford to leave their jobs for 3 months to go backpack around Europe with plane flights and accommodations, etc. But they can't put in a loan application for a business endeavor, and they have to depend on the grandparents to basically foot both bills. I mean, there's even a point where Rory like yells at Lorelai for clipping coupons. And I'm like, why? Like, what harm is there? Like, how is this hurting you?
I guess what I'm saying is I feel like there's a line in the sand that 2016 was, and I don't know how this show could ever get past that line, if it makes sense.
I think we're in a different place now. I think we're basically in that crazy 1968 year that kind of the before and the after is just totally different.
All right, so there you have it. IMDb says that the very best episode of Gilmore Girls is season 4, episode 22, Raincoats and Recipes. But I, Abby, completely disagree. Let's rewind back to the innocent origins of this show. Season 1, episode 5. It's called Cinnamon's Wake.
And I, Katie, counter with season 3, episode 7, They Shoot Gilmores, Don't They? Where we get to watch Stars Hollow in their crazy 1940s dance marathon.
All right, so now we've got to figure out what's on the agenda for next week. What are we watching? What are we thinking about?
I think we need to continue down our path of will they or won't they? I've already brought it up twice. We've got the Luke and Lorelai. Do you think we need to take a stab at the Ross and the Rachel?
Well, there is that dollhouse connection.
Of course, we've got to blame it on the dollhouse.
Well, I'll be there for you if that's your suggestion.
Oh, yes.
All right, well, you can hand clap along, watch as much Friends as you can possibly get in the next 2 weeks, and we will be back to chat all about it.
Gather your friends, and we'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.